Yeah, I remember early on in my coaching career, I had a student come in who was highly stressed, highly worked up, and for the most of the time, he just talked. At the end, he like had this big sigh and says to me, "Man, it feels so good to have somebody listen to me." And I've always remembered that. And I think I hope that my kids say that to me. Welcome to the Dad Central Show, hosted by Ed Gow Jr. and Drew Solon. We know dads want to see their kids succeed, but they don't always know how to get there. This show gives dads the tools they need to raise confident and successful kids.
What is up, everybody? It's Ed Gow Jr. of the Dad Central Show and Dad Central. And Han Solo. We're Han Solo today. I'm Han Solo with this guy.
Oh, you're Han Solo, meaning you want me to take
we're
take
going
a seat
solo.
and leave?
We're soloing today.
Yeah, hi, it's Drew Solon,
Dad
Central, the Dad Central Show, Han Solo with Mr. Ed Gow Jr.
What's up?
What's up? We're learning and we're growing, and we're, I think, going to be experimenting. You hinted a few shows ago that we're going to be, we got some fun things coming up. So this is maybe part of that process of learning and growing and doing some things a little bit differently on the show, with the singular goal of adding value to those who are listening and helping you in your most important role, which is being a dad.
All right.
So it's exciting to be part of that.
Always, right from the get-go till we call it a day. Absolutely. The Dad Central Show is sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. Dove Men Plus Care believes that care is the best of a man, because when men care for themselves and others, there's a positive impact. So Drew wanted to do some stuff today. So Drew wanted to chat about the power of communication to strengthen family bonds on the Dad Central Show. Why did you want to chat about this today?
I feel like it's a really important topic. I feel like if dads are listening, their relationships and their family is important to them. And oftentimes we might get tripped up, and our communication can blow up or not be received in the way that we want it to be. And it can really create a lot of pain sometimes if it's not handled well. On the reverse side, it's an amazingly powerful tool. Connection is like magic for our brains, and it creates such powerful bonds when it's handled really well. So I think of it as a really crucial topic. And this month, our fatherhood focus, you could say, is personal growth. And what better way to start that process around the things that are so valuable and important as creating family bonds and connections? And with some simple, like today we're talking about some simple, not necessarily easy, but simple things that everyone, no matter where you're at, every dad can do. I know every dad can do these things, because guess what? If I've learned how to do them, every dad can learn how to do them.
All right. Well, let's start off with the first area that you want to chat about.
Listening. Well, I would love to do that, Ed. But before we do that, I want to get your perspective. What are your thoughts on the importance of communication when it comes to building family connections?
This is probably, we don't got enough time for this, but I will say it's one of those things that I think, do a lot of dads have exposure of this even before they're a dad? Right? Is it something that you were exposed to, or is it something you're learning? I think we're always learning and growing, but I think one of the key things when we're sharing about these areas is, were you exposed to any of these before you became a dad, father, or male caregiver? Because in a lot of the conversations we've had on the Dad Central Show, we've heard how our friends, their lives growing up, especially with their dad, molded them in many ways to who they are today. So there's always a backstory. And I think anyone who's watching or listening to this, don't feel bad if you're not where you're supposed to be, because we're all works in progress. So these are just things to add positive value. Maybe there'll be an idea that comes up, go, yeah, I like to try that. So I think for me, these are not only for dads, but also men and those who love them. These are core principles that we should be working on each day to get a little bit better each day for your fatherhood and familyhood.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I'll also add, as you're mentioning it, the number one skill identified by Harvard Business Review for career growth and career trajectory, what is it? Communication. So, yes, it's so important for family, but at the end of the day, this is a crucial skill anywhere. You want to succeed, you want to excel. If you can master some of these fundamental skills we're talking about today, I think you'll do quite well. And I can be honest, the my introduction into this was reading John Maxwell's book Everyone Communicates, Few Connect back in 2013. I was facing a work situation that was driving me insane. I had a toxic workplace at the time, and I was doing all that I could to grow myself out of it. And what this book did is it gave me a whole new paradigm. And the more that I actually applied the learning from it at work, it's amazing the transformation that happened. But then I started applying it everywhere in my life. And again, the transformation for me was really significant. So this isn't something that I just come at from, I come at it from, my personal experiences, but I think that there's so much evidence out there of how powerful and valuable it is. When you look at marriage relationships, communication, right? It's fundamental. So I guess the one thing I want to start for dads to think about is there is strong science behind the power and value of your ability to communicate with your family. Many dads in our generation might have grown up with a strong silent type dad. Dad was didn't say very much, but when he spoke, you listened. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I think that there's more that we can do as dads if we've experienced that growing up, to intentionally and purposefully communicate with our families in ways that helps them more, empowers them more, equips them more, teaches them more, guides them more, maybe most importantly, helps them feel our love and acceptance of who they are. So I think it's obviously very important, as we've talked about. But yeah, he wanted to start with listening. So why is, I guess, listening so important? Because ultimately, it's like the first step in communication. And really, I think it comes down to some simple things like, can you give another person your full and undivided attention? Can you give them eye contact? Can you truly focus on what they're saying without interrupting or judging? And I think the key for me is remembering that listening isn't just about hearing words. It's about understanding the underlying emotions and needs that are behind them. Yeah. Yeah. Let's say you're a new dad and you've got like I don't know, Eliana's at home. She's a 14-month-old now. Is she talking? No. Does that mean I can't use my listening skills? Actually, no, it doesn't. In fact, I'm listening by observing. I'm listening by seeing her facial expressions. I'm listening by, sometimes she is now starting to be more actual vocal, not with words, but with sounds. And those sounds really convey some meaning. And so, even if your child is really young, these are fundamental things that you can begin doing now that help your child feel like you are listening to them. I remember my twins when they were born, they might be in another room and they would be communicating something where I think they could be vocal. And I would make sure that I responded to them by saying, "Hey, I hear you," and I'd try and use their name. Jada, I hear you. I know that you're there. That is going to be there in a few minutes, even if I couldn't come right away. That might be an example of when they woke up from a nap, and I'm not going right away. Maybe they're making a little bit of noise, but I would at least communicate because maybe I was in the bathroom or whatever's going on. I couldn't be there right away. I didn't want to leave an open silence. I wanted to be able to communicate that. So to me, the more that you can do things like that, that convey your ability that you are listening and you're paying attention, I think that's a very powerful thing. The final thing I'll say is, I remember early on in my coaching career, I had a student come in who was highly stressed, highly worked up, and for most of the time, I was, giving him that eye contact, leaning forward, leaning in, essentially, paraphrasing one or two things that he might have said, and for the most of the time, he just talked. At the end, he like had this big sigh and says to me, "Man, it feels so good to have somebody listen to me." And I've always remembered that. And I think I hope that my kids say that to me quite often too.
Excellent. Uh, you mentioned about feeling valued and feeling heard. So, got a conversation piece, and maybe not specifically for you, but for our fathers out there, fathers, male caregivers, and dads. How do you ensure that your family members feel heard and valued during conversations?
I think it's a great question. I think it's actually a great question to ask the people who are important in your life is how do you know that I've been listening to you? What do I do now that shows you that I'm listening? If you're not sure on what you're doing and if they're even receiving it, because then they can give you some feedback. You know what, Dad, I really love it when you do this. And if you hear that, then it's like, do that more, right? Because you're someone's telling you that they love it when you're doing this. I think it's a great question. Um, I can share more from my perspective in terms of what helps me feel heard and valued. If someone puts away their distractions and actually gives me eye contact, I feel like they are paying attention to me, first off. If they, nod their head or they ask clarifying questions, or if they say, Drew, it sounds like you're feeling this way, or I could see why that would be bothering you, or even they repeat, so you're saying this. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. Those are simple signs that tell me, oh, this person's really listening. But I think I mentioned one of them. There are some barriers that get in the way of our ability as dads to listen. So I don't think we should walk away without talking about those. Can you share or think of any barriers to dad's ability to actually listen?
Oh, probably whether it's dad or children's digital communication.
Mm,
That's probably, I think, more than anything else I hear from dads, one of the biggest barriers to communication. When they say they're kids, and I sometimes say, well, what about you?
hmm
All right, what about you? And they take that reflection, they go quiet and they go that reflection. Yeah, I'm on my phone a lot. So I think, and the good about this episode, we're doing it. The not so good. Well, the not so good is that we're not going to cover everything in one point, but I think there's other episodes because there's a lot of things that need to be shared in regards to communication when it comes to fatherhood. So I think this we have a developing series here. I'll leave it at that because there's Drew has some more things he wants to share, so I want to make sure that he gets them in too.
Yeah. Well, in terms of the barriers, I think the reality is time. Time constraints can really limit us, right? We have limited either time with our kids, or by the time we get home from work, there's basically the routine you got to get through, and you're not really interacting. And do you have time to listen? No, we just got to get through things and get to bed. A recent conversation we had on the podcast, a father was sharing about having three children under the age of two, and literally trying to get everything done. He's trying to fold laundry, holding all three kids. The time constraints can really be barriers to our ability to actually pause and say, can I listen? I think stress, our own emotional baggage or stuff that we got going on, whether we're aware of it or not. Maybe we never had anyone who listened to us. Maybe we don't feel like our partner listens to us,
There you
right?
go.
The other thing is just we could communication style differences. So I just wanted to touch on those briefly to acknowledge that there are some things that can get in the way, and the more that we're aware of those things that get in the way, then we can make a conscious choice to maybe no longer let that become a barrier to our ability to listen to our kids.
I think it can't. I think barriers are going to get in the way in the role of father.
Yeah.
And I think that again, going back to our Super Dad, Super Kids course, one of the main themes is what happened, or what happened, why did it happen, and what's the next best thing to do. So when those distractions happen, and they're going to happen, if you can plan ahead, great. But if not, take them as an experiment and a learning experience, so that the next time an opportunity or challenge comes up, you're better equipped to come out on the winning side in a quicker period of time.
Yeah. Well said. Are you a dad who feels like you're juggling a million things at once? Balancing work, family, and personal goals can be overwhelming. But what if there was a solution? That's why we created our new fatherhood community called Dad Mentor. For over 20 years, Dad Central has built practical tools to help dads. We understand the challenges you face and provide the support you need to thrive. The biggest complaint we hear from dads is there's no dedicated support for their specific needs, but not anymore. Our new community, called Dad Mentor, is here to transform your fatherhood experience. Imagine feeling in control, staying calm and patient when your children misbehave. Picture yourself connected to your children, guiding them with confidence and watching them succeed. When you join Dad Mentor, you'll have access to a community of like minded dads committed to their dad journey, just like you. You'll also get the Dad's Roadmap. This is a step by step plan to help you go from unsure to unstoppable as a dad. Monthly masterclasses and Q&A sessions. You'll get answers and know exactly what to do straight from experts. Monthly group meetups that connect dads over common topics. A dad's resource library. Curated webinars, podcasts, or guides built by Dad Central to help you grow as a parent. And finally, you'll also get exclusive members-only offers and events. Now, many dads do try to do this fatherhood thing alone, only to find themselves trapped in frustration and strained relationships. Then they may turn to unhealthy coping mechanisms like drugs, alcohol, or other distractions, leaving their family and their own well-being at risk. We don't want you to reach that point of regret. Take steps to invest in you and your family today. Join Dad Mentor and go from stressed, tired, and overwhelmed to confident, calm, and connected. Join us today by going to dadcentral.ca/dads.
All right. Next up.
Well, I think it's great to demonstrate that you're listening, but next you have to show that you have some form of understanding and not just surface level, like, oh yeah, that, that I get that, but maybe to this idea of empathetic understanding. There's a quote here from Brene Brown that I'll mention. Um, she talks about the importance of recognizing and validating, another person's feelings, even if you don't necessarily agree with their perspective. And that's, I think, an important thing because when my toddler is freaking out about the broken crayon, I don't agree that it's the end of the world, but they somehow do. Here's where my ability to effectively do empathetic understanding of my toddler's world can make a significant difference in one, the child's ability to learn to self regulate through their upset, as well as their ability to become more emotionally aware and feeling seen, heard, and understood. Because the reality is, once you process an emotion, it basically dissipates. And the challenge that I see happen a lot is that we don't want our child to get that upset over something that we don't think is worthy to be upset. And then we, rather than empathetically understanding why they're upset and allowing them to express or feel their feelings, we squash it, we chastise it, we disagree with it, and we get angry at it. And again, I'm putting my hand up first because I've been there and I've done that. But the reason I share it is because I've learned a much better way, a much more effective way. And the effective way that I think is a very practical, tangible tool comes from a guy by the name of Chris Voss, who wrote a book about negotiation of all things. And it's a powerful tool called labeling. And it's powerful because it helps you and your child identify the underlying emotion that they're experiencing and gives space and time for it to be experienced and even processed, which will then allow it to dissipate, and then you can get beyond it, which is ultimately what we want when we see the toddler tantruming over something ridiculous, or even our 10-year-old tween tantruming, or our partner having an adult tantrum. And so the best way through it is to label. And there's three specific ways. So labels all start with the same three possible phrases. Number one, it sounds like ... Number two, it seems like ... Or number three, it looks like ... So let's say, here's another example. Your child's expressing anger at their teacher for giving them a bad mark on a project that they worked really hard on. So you can tell that they're really disappointed in the grade because they actually put a lot of time into it. So the label might sound like, it sounds like you're really disappointed with your grade. And then you just leave the label to do its work. You leave time and space for that realization that, yeah, actually, I am really disappointed in my grade. I expected to get an A because I put in a ton of time and effort into it. So the key is that time and space after the label. I say that's key, but truthfully, the first and most important is that our ability to recognize what's actually going on in our child and not to react based on our own emotions in terms of, you shouldn't be upset about that because I don't think you put that much work in. Because then it becomes about you and not about them, because they need to feel seen, heard, and valued. So the label just gives a name to the underlying emotion and allows it to then either be accepted or rejected by the person. And so I think, and here's the other thing: the label doesn't have to be 100% accurate. So maybe our ability to assess what it is not that crucial. What's crucial is that something's stated. It sounds like, it seems like, it looks like, and the space is given for them to respond to it. So I just think that's such a powerful tool. I've applied it in so many situations, in almost every conversation, either coaching as a professional or relationally with my partner and with my kids, and it makes a huge, huge difference. Because I like to ask questions and I can talk sometimes, the hardest part for me is leaving space after the label, but it's the most important.
Yeah, we have to always realize that a conversation is a living, breathing thing. So let it live and let it breathe. Whether it's with yourself, with your partner, with your kids, it's a living, breathing thing. We also have to realize our kids move through the world differently than we do.
Hmm.
They don't, and everyone moves through the world differently than we do. So we have to make sure we realize and put that into action.
Yeah, and I think putting that into action, if this last step, I said empathetic understanding, but now the process of actual empathy is important. And so, uh, empathy is the ability to step into someone else's shoes and see the world from their perspective. Now, I've done some work with Dr. Laura Markham. So she's a clinical psychologist. She's a parenting expert. She really encourages parents not only validate their child's emotions, but also imagine and feel the feelings that our children might be experiencing in the moment. You that's not always easy to do. Again, I go back to that freaking out toddler. A crayon in my world is not a big deal. But to then pause and put myself into, a 3-year-old's mind frame, and to feel the disappointment, to know that I was super excited about something, it really does help. I think that's a powerful example of, can you, in those moments, step outside of yourself and your feelings, and really feel what your child might be feeling in that situation. I think it's important. So, again, our language, our ability to communicate empathy is not just with our words, because we know communication, tone of voice and body language actually account for the majority of our communication. So if you're rolling your eyes, if you're scowling with a look on your face, if your body is like you've got your arms folded, you're not, no matter what you say with your words, even if it sounds empathetic, your body is communicating, I don't really have empathy for you right now. So the one point I want to mention, dads, is be mindful of your body language when you're trying to demonstrate this skill of empathy. And so your words that can go with an open body language, maybe getting down on your knees, looking at your child with a sense of wide eyes, or, oh, I can see why you're upset. And then saying things like, I can see that you're feeling really frustrated right now. I can see that that's really upsetting you now. Or it sounds like you really wanted that crayon. I think all with a tone of voice that is calm, that is kind, and looking at your child in the eye, those all can convey that empathy that it's hard to be there right now. Honestly, sometimes empathy for me is easiest done without saying any words at all. It's more about I go into a very low posture right next to them, and I just look at them with a sense of, in my mind, I'm saying, this must be hard for you. But I'm not saying it. But I'm there in a posture that says, I'm here with you, even if I'm not saying anything. And so I think at the end of the day, this isn't always easy when we talked about some of those barriers before, but I feel like it's one of the most powerful things you can do because everyone wants to feel seen, heard, and valued. And empathy allows another person to feel like they are seen, heard, and valued.
Good way to cap it off. So I know that usually we end off our conversations with two questions. So I have two questions for the audience. The first question I have is for, what are your communication goals for your family as your children grow older? And another question, how do you plan to continue strengthening your family bonds through communication in the future?
And
That's not for you. That you can answer that if you want, but I just wanted to put that out to the general audience because I like to have some call to actions. We always ask our guests questions then. So let's put it out to the people who are watching and listen to make them
absolutely. And if you are listening to that, we would love to hear your responses to those questions. Feel free to put them in the comment section on whatever platform if you're on YouTube, go ahead, put your answers to those questions in the comments. If you are on our website or listening to it on there, go ahead and add a comment to this post. And we'd love to hear your answers to those questions. I think the phrase goes, a rising tide lifts all boats. And so if you've got tips, skills, things that you've done that have helped you demonstrate strong communication in your family, let's all learn from each other.
100%. So as we finish off, as always, the Dad Central Show is sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. Dove Men Plus Care believes care is the best of a man because when men care for themselves and others, there is a positive impact. Always, as Drew said, communicate with us. Best way is email podcast@dadcentral.ca. Questions, tips for our family, the big extended dad family, caregiver, father family that we have. And also, if you want to listen to replays or watch replays of our epic conversations, dadcentral.ca/podcast, and lots of free resources. Maybe we'll get some resources from you to put on a document on the website, dadcentral.ca. So as always, I'd like to say thank you for taking the most valuable thing. You have your time for us. And as always, don't just manage your time, manage your energy. Remember to give yourself grace, and we'll catch you soon. Be well and keep the faith.